Hey guys, Pete Weintraub, permanent weight loss specialist here, and today I have a very special guest. On today's call, I've got Dr. William Davis, a preventable cardiologist and best-selling author of Wheat Belly. His latest book, Undoctored, Why Healthcare Has Failed You and How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor, arms users with the vital tools they need to manage their health on their own terms. And Dr. Davis, before we start chatting and I introduce you, I just wanted to again reiterate how much of an impact you've had on my health, on my 100-pound weight loss journey. Wheat Belly and the nutritional philosophies within it were instrumental in helping me overcome a 2-year plateau. So guys, if you haven't checked that out or Undoctored, you'll definitely want to. That's in the comments below. So thanks for being here, Dr. Davis.
Oh, my pleasure. That's a fabulous story. 100 pounds is no small matter.
Oh, no, it took a long time, and I plateaued for 2 years, almost gave up, and almost said, you know what, I'm going to have the muffin top and be 40, 50 pounds overweight still forever, but that was the pinnacle to getting the rest of it off. So I definitely think a lot of people will find value in what we're going to talk about. So I find your story to be fascinating. So before you wrote Undoctored, and obviously even before you wrote Wheat Belly, you struggled with your weight as a cardiologist for many years, and you had some health issues. So if you feel comfortable, tell the folks a little bit about that.
Sure, Peter. You know, I wish I could tell you I'm brilliant and all this stuff came to me in a flash of insight, but it did not. I stumbled and bumbled my way here. And 25 years ago, when I was in conventional cardiology practice doing the standard stuff cardiologists do, like heart catheterizations and stress tests and angioplasty and stents and all that sort of thing, I heard Dr. Dean Ornish speak. And as you know, he advocates an ultra-low-fat diet, vegetarian ultra-low-fat. So and he claimed to reverse heart disease, which he did not, by the way. No. He thinks he did. He misinterpreted his data. But I heard him talk, and I was, I'm going to try that. So I did it. I put myself on this diet, and I was so persuaded, I actually put several hundred of my patients at the time on it also. And I promptly gained 30 pounds. My triglycerides went to 350. My HDL good cholesterol dropped to 27, which is a high-risk level. And I became a type 2 diabetic with high blood pressure. I had fasting blood sugars in the 160 range. It sobered me to realize just how far wrong diet can take you. So I stopped being a vegetarian, low-fat vegetarian, and I got rid of all those conditions. But it took me a while to really understand what I'd done wrong. I even talked to Dr. Ornish himself, got quite angry with me, accusing me of eating too many refined grains. And of course, I did not. I actually took that problem very seriously. I saw the similar kind of phenomena occur in many people. Rising triglycerides, drop in HDL, skyrocketing small LDL particles. That's the real cause for heart disease, not LDL cholesterol, not cholesterol. Increased blood pressure. Some people lost weight, many did not. So I saw a real mishmash. And by the way, so I tried to puzzle this all together over the years, but I made my own series of blunders, Peter, to get here.
Yeah, for sure. And I did too. And I'm glad you found out what worked for you with Wheat Belly and now Undoctored, and I found it because we both wouldn't be where we are today if not for it. So what specifically caused you to write Undoctored, and what did you feel you still had to say that wasn't already stated in Wheat Belly?
Well, I'll tell you what happened in the Wheat Belly experience. So the first book was about what agribusiness had done to wheat. Converted it from a 4.5-foot tall traditional plant to an 18-inch tall, high-yield semi-dwarf strain. They exaggerated all the adverse. Wheat has been a problem for as long as humans have tried to eat it for the last 10,000 years. But it's gotten so much worse the last 40 or so years because of the efforts of genetics and agribusiness. And it's responsible now for a huge swath of health problems. And when people take out wheat, they enjoy wonderful changes in health, like magnificent weight loss, reversal of autoimmune diseases, and psoriasis, and seborrhea, and migraine headaches, and acid reflux, and IBS, and fibromyalgia. But it became clear that you'd get even more benefit if you took out all grains, all seeds of grasses. That's what all grains are. It became even clearer as the entire Wheat Belly experience worldwide, millions of people did this and reported back, that there was even greater benefit if we corrected some of the common nutritional deficiencies that persisted, caused by grains, but persisted after grain removal. It's like magnesium, for instance. Phytates in grains block magnesium absorption, so people start very profoundly magnesium deficient, so we restore magnesium. And to also restore some common deficiencies. Iodine. I'm in the Midwest, and iodine deficiency is everywhere here. Any inland area away from the ocean, it's iodine deficient. So we did all these things. And then many people said this to me. I went to my doctor. I told him I was going to do this wheat belly thing. And my doctor said, that's not what the USDA says. It's not what the American Association says. If you do it, you're going to get sick, and you're going to gain weight, and you're going to have high cholesterol. You're going to end up on cholesterol drugs. Don't do it, stupid. And this person would do it anyway. And they lose 57 pounds. Pardon me. They lose an extraordinary amount of weight. Diabetics would become non-diabetic. Blood pressure would drop. They get off blood pressure medicines. Their acid reflux, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, migraine headaches, skin rashes, joint pain would go away. So what I started to recognize was that people were enjoying magnificent transformations in health, in appearance, looking 10 to 20 years younger, feeling better, despite the blundering of their doctor. So what I started to realize was that this was not just a way for a woman to fit into a size 2 bikini or a guy to fit back in his skinny jeans. This was really, we'd stumbled on a way to recover, restore health to an extraordinary degree. Literally, I mean this quite literally, hundreds of health conditions go away with this approach, with this combined approach. There's only 6 basic strategies, Peter, in the entire undoctored menu of strategies. And it's the stuff we've explored. I take this further now. And I throw this into the context of how do you free yourself from also what has become a very predatory healthcare system. So we all pay ungodly health insurance premiums.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Heaven forbid you get sick. It's not uncommon to go bankrupt because you get sick. Even in people who have health insurance, they can go bankrupt. And it's not because healthcare is so expensive. It's because the healthcare system is so greedy. We pay more in the U.S. than any other nation on earth, yet we rank last among developed countries, the 13 most developed countries. We are 13th in healthcare quality. People say, oh, we pay most for the best healthcare system in the world. That's not true.
Yeah.
That was true. It's not true anymore. We pay more in percentage of GDP, 17.5% of GDP, 12.5% in Canada. We pay $10,000 per American per year for health care. Yet we are sicker than other European countries, Canadians, etc. And it's because in the U.S., the drug industry and the medical device industry and the hospital industry and my colleagues, the doctors, are much more greedy and profit-centered than else. Yet we're not, it's become clear, Peter, the more spent on health care, the higher the mortality rate. Not the better the health, the higher the mortality rate. Yet, I'm sure it's the same in your town as where I am in Milwaukee. Every hospital is trying to expand its programs, recruit new specialists, add another MRI, grow more operating rooms and cath labs. And they want, because it drives revenues. More services drives more revenues. So healthcare. So that's why I think this message is so important. If you and I and your listeners have the capacity to become extraordinarily healthy, despite the profiteering, predatory ways of the healthcare system, that's what I'm trying to get done here.
Yeah, and I think this book lays out a great plan. 6 weeks on your plan, and I think a lot of people are going to be much better off. So tell us a little bit about what people can do to improve their health. I know you mentioned going to different online forums and sites, but obviously there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. And you mentioned in the book, some certain sites, I won't name them here, but there are certain sites that a lot of people turn to for medical advice that aren't necessarily best based upon who's sponsoring and paying for them. So if you can, just choose, 1 or 2 or even 3 places people can go to learn more about how to better their health online. What would you say those would be?
Yeah, we've got to be very skeptical, right? Even the doctor often doesn't really understand that what he's telling you are lies. So a very common area are the statin drugs for cholesterol. The benefits of statin drugs are typically exaggerated 30 to 40-fold. 30 to 40-fold. Imagine you went to a stockbroker and he says, Mr. Weintraub, I can return 36% per year on your money. You'd say, sign me up. Wow. I was
Yeah, of course.
8% in a good year, right? 36%. A year later, he tells you, sorry, we only made 1%. You'd be very upset.
Oh,
Yet
yeah.
that goes on every day in the healthcare system. The benefits of drugs and medical devices are wildly exaggerated because of statistical manipulations, such as a calculation called relative risk. So that's just one tiny example of the misinformation, the profiteering, the twisting of data that goes on in healthcare. So much what we get in healthcare we cannot trust. So don't go to websites that are supported by the drug industry. Here's something that I find very concerning, Peter, very concerning. Major media carries almost no criticisms of healthcare.
Oh, yeah.
They carry on discussions about the politics of healthcare, but almost no actual criticism or insightful reporting on healthcare economics, about the bankruptcies coming from healthcare, about the crippling costs of healthcare insurance. You know what I think that is? I think it's because direct-to-consumer drug advertising now controls the airwaves.
Yes.
Major media is so sensitive to the advertising dollars, they don't dare antagonize their advertisers. And so if you and I want to go on a major media and say something nasty about the pharmaceutical industry, we're not going to be allowed to do that.
Yep.
So Big Pharma, in effect, has bought big media. They now control the message.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so crucial that you and I talk, your listeners explore sources of unbiased information, not from the pharmaceutical industry. So websites that have drug ads, never use that source as a reliable source of information. There are many good sources, though, online. Doctors, like the naturopaths and functional medicine doctors, were just trying to get information out there. I hope my Undoctored websites become something like that. They haven't launched yet. They're going to launch in the next couple of weeks. There are websites like Cure Together and patientslikeme.com, where thousands of people provide their experiences, share them, rank how they're doing compared to other people with different therapies. They tend to be drug-based, but they do dabble in the nutritional, natural space as well. We're only beginning to see, I think, the power in collaboration, in crowd collaboration. But answers are now starting to come out of those kinds of efforts. And, you know, it's clear the combined collective wisdom of thousands of people, of teachers, engineers, salespeople, housewives, mothers, dads, all of us bring in our little piece of wisdom. You put it all together over thousands of people, and you start asking for solutions. Answers start coming out. And those answers are often better than what any one expert can provide. The wisdom of crowds is starting to gain incredible momentum. And I want Undoctored to be part of the igniting factor in that, in obtaining health answers.
Oh, absolutely.
I should point out, people get all scared and say, Undoctored, oh my God, you want me to diagnose my own disease? No. So I grappled with this for a long time. How do we get people to be healthy? Do we say, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, start with this menu of strategy? If you have coronary disease, start over here. If you have migraine headaches, eczema, psoriasis, seborrhea, or ulcerative colitis, you start over here. We don't do that. What we say, what I say in Undoctored, very simple. Everybody starts with a basic collection of strategies, what I call the wild, naked, and unwashed program. It's 6 basic strategies. It's grain elimination with carb limitation. It's restoration of thyroid status through iodine and some other efforts. Fish oil, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, vitamin D, very, very important, and cultivation of bowel flora with probiotic fermented foods and prebiotic fibers, some other efforts. Put those 6 things together and incredible things happen. If you had rheumatoid arthritis or type 2 diabetes or had a lot of weight to lose or had psoriasis or had polymyalgia rheumatica or lupus or any number of hundreds of other conditions, the overwhelming likelihood is in a few weeks, few months, if it's autoimmune, you won't have those conditions. So regardless of the starting label, you likely won't have that condition. So we don't get too concerned with what the starting label is because you will likely not have that condition in a short while.
Right. Absolutely. And then going going back a little bit to how things changed. So you mentioned in Undoctored that up until the 50s or 60s, there weren't any dietary guidelines, and medical practice, nutritional practice was much different than it is today. And you go into history a little bit, and I think it's fascinating. So if you can, just tell the listeners a little bit about what changed during that time and how it's negatively impacted our health. I know grains we've already gone into, but there are other aspects as well.
It was a collision, a combination to help people be healthier, and the people who engineered that legislation, like George McGovern, who was a well-intended man, I believe, just happened to have some vegetarians, low-fat vegetarians, had his ear and persuaded George McGovern that Americans should be low-fat and vegetarian. Well, they thought that was a little bit too radical for the time, and so they kind of tapered it back to just be a low-fat approach, low cholesterol, low saturated fat, low total fat approach. And because George McGovern believed that, and a handful of people around him, that became legislation. And it came to us through the U.S. Dietary Guidelines for Americans, USDA Food Pyramid and Food Plate, school lunch programs, and other programs. So they essentially systematized the low-fat approach, cut your cholesterol, saturated fat, etc. Now, the corollary of cut your fat is eat more healthy whole grains, because they were believed to be the most healthy replacement for those lost. You gotta have to get your calories from someplace. So in that government advice was a blunder of astounding proportions. That blunder, the U.S. Dietary Guidelines for Americans, and all the programs it spawned, is in large part responsible for now the obesity epidemic, the type 2 diabetes epidemic, and the autoimmune epidemic. There's also, we don't talk that much about that, 8 to 13% of North Americans and Western Europeans now have at least one, if not several, autoimmune diseases. And most of those are initiated by the gliadin protein of wheat, the secret of rye, and the hordein of barley, and the zein of corn. So a grain-based diet is an autoimmune disease-provoking diet. So we have this incredible situation, Peter, where government advice caused what they should have said was, we examined all the evidence on grain consumption. We're not even sure you should eat it at all. But if you do, keep it to very low amounts. Do not restrict your fat. There never was any evidence that restricting dietary fat, total fat, or saturated fat was of any benefit to anybody. So we had a bunch of nutritional zealots and misinformed, naive people like George McGovern. And George McGovern was not a naive man, but he was nutritionally naive. And he had advisors around him who had very personal agendas. And so, if the USDA and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services had gotten it right from the start, you and I would have nothing to do. Because everyone around us would be healthy and slender. But they got it so colossally wrong that it takes people like you and me and others to step in and say, listen, don't listen to the USDA, don't listen to U.S. Dietary Guidelines for Americans, because it's absolute nonsense. In fact, it's crippling if you follow that advice. So the positive thing here is, if we all accept that and ignore official advice, you found the first step to magnificent recovery in health.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. So something I do a lot, Dr. Davis, with my clients is I do actually prescribe, a higher fat diet. I do have some nutritional certifications and training, and I found, and it's functionally based, it's not, conventionally based. So a lot of people look at me at first like a deer caught in headlights, like, oh my God, if I eat too much dietary fat, like you said, I'm going to raise my cholesterol levels and I might get heart disease and things like that. And it couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, what I do a lot with my clients is I show them my bloods both before and after. And after starting a high-fat diet and losing the weight, and my bloods are better now than they've ever been. So you are a proponent, and on Undoctored, I believe you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're actually okay with people eating a more ketogenic, high-fat diet, provided they don't have type 1 diabetes or a couple of other pre-existing health conditions.
Absolutely. I saw this play out, Peter, and tens of thousands of people in my practice, and now, of course, many, many hundreds of thousands, millions of people who do these programs online. And so I had the same experience. So my triglycerides, as I told you, dropped from 350 to 47.
Yeah.
My HDL, 27, very high risk, is now 94. I almost quadrupled. That, by the way, is in conventional medical circles is supposed to be impossible. But I've seen it done by many, many people over and over and over again. I used to be a type 2 diabetic. I now have perfect blood sugars and a perfect A1C with no drugs whatsoever. I don't have high blood pressure. I don't have the IBS symptoms I used to have or the skin rashes. That's just my experience. Of course, there's lots more people who have had similar experiences. But when you eat fat, your metabolic markers improve, for the risks for heart disease improve dramatically. So we have another fiction, and that is cholesterol causes heart disease, right? That fat and cholesterol cause heart disease. They don't cause heart disease.
Right.
Cholesterol is nothing more than a crude, outdated marker for the lipoprotein particles, the fat-carrying particles that do cause heart disease. And by far and away, the most common lipoprotein that causes heart disease are small LDL particles because they're very prone to oxidation, glycation, they're adherent, they last 7 days instead of 24 hours, large LDL particles. Only two common foods provoke formation of small LDL particles, grains and sugars.
Yep.
So the national guidelines is an incredibly heart disease causing diet. Yet we were told that it's the fat that causes. You of course have heard the headlines from the Boston researchers at Harvard who were paid by the sugar industry to demonize fats and to bless sugar. And that's the kind of thing that also goes on in the grain world. We were told that grains and sugars were good for us. Grains, in fact, we were told should dominate our diet. According to many authorities in the grain world, our diet should be 70% grain-based now, which, of course, is absolutely contrary to any experience humans have had on this planet.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And the proof is in the pudding, both for yourself and for myself. When I eliminated grains from my diet, not only did my weight loss pick up, I did suffer from some acne, some eczema, all went away. My brain fog alleviated. It's crazy how just one simple tweak like that can make all the difference. And obviously, when you add in the dietary fat, people don't realize, like you said, that you are actually improving your likelihood for better health. So as patients, or I guess we can look at ourselves as patients, or just as individuals, we're looking to overcome the problems in the current healthcare system. And we've already touched on it. It seems that it's more profit-driven, putting Band-Aids on symptoms instead of finding the root cause and fixing it like the program in your book does. So what can we do as patients to get the best quality care?
One of the basic reasons I wrote the Undoctored book, Peter, was I'd become very cynical and skeptical that most of my mainstream colleagues, so there are many good practitioners out there in the integrative health world, the functional medicine world, people in your role, like nutritionists and counseling people, chiropractors, naturopaths are becoming real champions. There are people doing great work. So I'm really criticizing my immediate colleagues, the primary care MDs, the gastroenterologists, the cardiologists, the general surgeons, the ophthalmologists. That is 90% plus of mainstream practitioners who put profit before your health. So if you're an orthopedic surgeon making $2 million a year replacing hips and knees, you're not going to counsel people when they're 20 or 30 or 40 years old on how not to undergo surgery at age 50 or 60. You're not going to waste your time. And so my colleagues have locked themselves into a profit-generating machine, a way of practicing, and they're not going to change their ways. So I've lost faith that my colleagues will become sources or champions of health. But the great irony is, as you've pointed out, the critical mass of information, the potential for online collaboration, the collating of information, social media, all these things add up and put an astounding power in the hands of the individual and regaining control over health so that people can become healthy in spite of their doctor. So people think, well, if I did this by myself, do you think I can be as healthy as I might be if a doctor was taking care of me? Actually, the health you achieve, and you're a perfect example of it, the health you achieve, me too, the health you achieve without the doctor is dramatically superior. The kind of health your doctor would provide. Because the doctor thinks he monetizes health. He says you need a statin drug to maintain cardiovascular health. You need aspirin to maintain cardiovascular health. You need cellulose fiber, like wood fiber, and a colonoscopy at age 55 to preserve colon health. You need Premarin for hormonal health to women. In other words, the answers you get from conventional doctors are so miserable, and they don't give you health. They monetize health and disrupt health. So the health we achieve using these more natural, what I call adaptive methods, achieves a level of functioning, appearance, weight, and health that is superior. That's why when people who do these programs go back to their doctors, the doctor says, "What did you do? Did you have plastic surgery?" And the patient tells them, and the doctor says, "Well, I don't get that. Just continue, do what you're doing."
Yeah.
They don't even want to know. That astounds me, Peter. They don't say, "John, what did you do? Tell me. I need to understand this. I could learn from this." Instead, they say, "Coincidence. Doesn't matter to me. See you in a year." They don't care to understand health, and that's a crime. That's wrong. They've lost sight of the idea that healthcare is supposed to provide health, not just a means of generating revenues for the healthcare system. So we have to do it on our own.
Yes, absolutely. So now, if somebody takes an undoctored approach, you cover this in the book, but you're touching on it here as well. What can someone do? How should they approach the relationship now with any of their specialists or medical practitioners? So you mentioned earlier that people just whatever procedure is necessary. Dr. Davis, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So they'll take whatever pill or procedure is necessary from the practitioner. So instead of blindly trusting what they're saying, because you're right, I think in many instances, the treatments they're given, the training they're given is all profit-driven for big pharma and different areas. How should they approach their relationships now with their practitioners versus just blindly trusting them?
I think you have to insist. Everybody has to insist that any practitioner you deal with, you insist that this person act as your advocate, your champion for health. If they are, dictatorial, the paternalistic, I'm the doctor, you're the patient, do what I tell you or shut up. If you get that kind of attitude, maybe not those words, but that attitude, walk out, leave, and find someone who's going to collaborate with you. You might have to try a few. Word of mouth still works quite well. Here's my experience. If you tap into one collaborative practitioner, one who acts as your advocate, who understands that you bring knowledge to the table, you have good questions, you have concerns, and they're legitimate. If you find a practitioner like that, that practitioner often knows many other like-minded practitioners. Maybe you start with a chiropractor, for instance, or a naturopath, or a functional medicine doctor. And then let's say you're a woman and you need to see a gynecologist, but you don't want to see any old gynecologist. You just want to take your uterus out, do a DNC. You want to understand, are there natural means? Are there hormonal changes? Can I address this in some more rational way before you take my uterus out? That functional medicine doctor or chiropractor or naturopath will likely know somebody who's, oh yes, I know Dr. So-and-so, and he or she is very open-minded and will talk with you all the alternatives. So it really helps identify. It can be frustrating at first though, because I can't kid your listeners, most of my colleagues are still locked into that paternalistic model. They think their word is the last word, and you don't even have a right to say anything. So people also have, this is going to sound very obvious, but most people need to be reminded of this. The doctor-patient relationship is voluntary. The doctor can't order you to do anything. He can order his staff or the hospital staff to follow orders, but he can't order you to do no more than going to the auto mechanic. The auto mechanic can't tell you. He can't say, Peter, quit driving so fast or whatever. He can't tell you that kind. The doctor can't do that either. He can advise you. And the smartest doctor will advise you as an advocate for your health, not as a paternalistic, I want you to go to the hospital for an MRI and an implantable defibrillator kind of doctor.
Right.
So I tell people to regard the doctor as a car salesman. You would never accept what a car salesman tells you at face value. You're going to check on your own. You're going to talk to other people. You'll shop around. You're going to do the same thing, sad to say, before you get pulled into a $100,000 investment interaction, because that's what happens now, right? Mm-hmm. I've seen this many, many times. Somebody goes into the hospital for a shoulder pain, and they end up with a $160,000 hospital bill. No joke. That's happened many, many times.
Hmm.
With well-rehearsed lines. Peter, I got, that shoulder pain could be heart disease. The first sign of heart disease is often sudden cardiac death. Well, now you're terrified. And you just bought $100,000 worth of cardiac testing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it goes in healthcare. It shouldn't be that way. So insist on better answers. Insist on working with doctors and practitioners who are collaborators with you.
Yes, I agree 110%. So obviously this podcast is also about weight loss, and I'm very much a proponent of doing so in a healthier way, not a quick fix fad diet. So you touch on this in Undoctored, how important or not exercise is for overall weight loss. And I've said for years that while it's good for overall health, it really isn't conducive to weight loss, especially if you're ingesting a lot of stuff you shouldn't. So I'd love to get your take on that.
Oh, hallelujah. Good for you. I would agree absolutely. The only people who lose weight when they exercise are people who go from very sedentary lifestyles to now very vigorous. And you can get this honeymoon upfront weight loss effect. But for the majority of people who exercise chronically, the body adapts, it adjusts, and you do not lose weight. You cannot use exercise as an effective weight loss tool. But as you point out, very importantly, exercise is important, though. It improves insulin resistance. It can reverse fatty liver and liver insulin resistance. It can prevent Alzheimer's. That's quite well proven now. It increases hippocampal and other brain areas volumes, reduce blood pressure a little bit. So there are many benefits to exercise, mental health benefits, emotional health benefits, but not as a weight loss tool. So weight loss comes by what you put in your mouth or don't put in your mouth, not by exercise. I agree absolutely.
All right, awesome. So last question, and then I'll direct folks to how they can get a hold of your book. So how can a person on their weight loss journey benefit from reading and implementing the information in your book? So obviously, it's not just for health. A lot of people who are overweight, who may have hormonal issues, like you pointed out, will not only correct those issues by following the 6-week program you lay out, but also they'll lose a lot of weight. So tell folks about how this book can help them on their weight loss journeys.
Sure. I'm a big advocate, as you are, for truth and healthy eating. But the truth about healthy eating and weight loss is it doesn't always lead to losing all the weight you want. So wheat and grain elimination and carb limitation is a great start to losing a ton of weight. But what if you have iodine deficiency? You've got to correct that. What if you have dysbiosis, disruptions of bowel flora? That can block successful weight. You got to correct that. What if you have excessive insulin resistance? You're going to have to address. In other words, there are numerous impediments to successful weight loss that you must identify and correct. So I go through all those items in the Undoctored book and show you how to correct them, often on your own. Sometimes you do need the help of a healthcare practitioner, but often you can do it on your own. I talk about simple strategies, Peter, like, for instance, people can use a glucose meter, even if they're not diabetic. You can use a glucose meter as a very easy, effective, inexpensive way to accelerate weight loss or to break a weight loss plateau. And I discuss that in the book. The doctor tells you the glucose meter is to manage your diabetes. But he didn't tell you you could also use it, the same glucose meter, to reverse diabetes and become non-diabetic, at least type 2, or to accelerate weight loss. He didn't tell you that part because the doctor doesn't understand health. He understands disease and monetizing disease.
Right.
So you and I are about health and doing it without the doctor and without the healthcare system. And you can engineer your way to being slender quite easily if just given some benign help.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And that's why I always look to approach things in a healthy, sustainable way so that we're not just fixing you short term and then you put it all back on because you haven't learned anything. It's important to internalize all the information in this book so that you can not only lose weight, keep it off, but also simultaneously improve your health. And correct me if I'm wrong too, the way that you would eat and approach nutrition in this book is much the same as you would if you were perfectly healthy. It's a great way to maintain your health as well. So it's not, a diet and then, you're really liberal again with your eating.
Exactly right. So it's people who stay on this lifestyle do not regain. If you count your calories or points or do some extreme thing to lose weight, you'll regain it. And that's quite clear in the medical literature. People who take the weight loss drugs regain that weight. The Biggest Loser TV show, those people regain all that weight after they come off the show because they turn their metabolic rate down. So the people who do this more rational approach to living don't regain the weight. In fact, a very common question around my neighborhood, that is the Wheat Belly Undoctored online neighborhoods, is, am I too skinny? So it's so people become concerned. They're not too skinny typically, by the way. They're slender or normal in a world of heavy Americans. That's what they're encountering.
Absolutely. So guys, please check out Undoctored. I have it in the comments below. I have a link right to it through Amazon. So please either pick up a hard copy, Kindle edition as well. I actually got the audiobook. It was great. So for that, I'm Pete Weintraub, permanent weight loss specialist. Check me out at weightlossbypete.com. Dr. Davis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on.
Pleasure's mine, Pete.
All right. Take care.